Welcome to For All Humans. The name Jeanne Calment may not be familiar to you. Jeanne, a French woman, is certified as the oldest person to have lived. She died on the 4th of August 1997 at the ripe old age of 122 years, 164 days. An ageing population is now a global phenomenon as human beings, especially within the developing world, are living longer. It's common to see people thriving well into their 70s and actually beyond. In Japan, there is even a growing group of super centenarians who are people aged over 110 years. According to the Office of National Statistics, 1/3 of babies born in 2013 in the UK are expected to live to see their 100th birthday. This global trend towards lower mortality rates is due to a combination of medical advances, improvement in the quality of life, and rapidly expanding economies. Though the picture painted here may seem a rosy one, as people living longer is a sign of a modern, advanced, and well-functioning society, it's not without its challenges. So what are the specific issues that an ageing population presents? Why might demographic change be seen as one of the defining issues of our time? And what are the responsibilities of family and/or the state? And what is the duty of care towards the elderly? What of the growing proportion of the elderly that are living in poverty? What challenges will healthcare systems face as they serve ageing populations? Who will fund this care? Let's look at this issue through a global lens. In the year 2015, there were around 901 million people aged 60 and over living across the globe. This represented 12.3% of the world's population. Set to rise by 2030, this will have increased to 1.4 billion, or 16%. By 2050, it will increase to 2.1 billion, or 21.3% of the global population. The populations of countries that are seen as more developed have aged the most rapidly, but projections estimate that the proportion of older people is set to increase in all regions of the world. Europe, Japan, and North America will have some of the oldest inhabitants, with China, America, and Latin America also set to show significant increases by 2050, according to the World Health Organization. It's clear that caring for the elderly will have to be a global endeavour, a consideration for every single society in the world. If reaching an advanced age will be commonplace in society, what will the effect be on the attitudes we have towards the elderly? Is there a divide between Western and Eastern perspectives towards the elderly? And which are the societies where old people are often invisible? What role does culture have to play towards shaping how our aged are perceived? And through considering all of these questions, we will also explore Islam's position when it comes to this issue. So first, let's see if there is a discernible difference in attitudes towards the elderly when considering a Western versus Asian Eastern approach. On the surface, the belief that cultural values play a role in the way that the elderly are viewed and treated is a pervasive one. Aging, a natural and biological process, has increasingly come to be seen as a journey with a myriad of different interpretations. Cultures differ hugely in their attitudes, perceptions, and practices towards the ageing population and the ageing process, and ultimately death itself. This is reflected in social representation theories that describe the ageing process within a given culture as a form of shared cultural experience. This implies a shared framework of ideas, values, and customs in regards to ageing that are embraced by members of society as an established reality. Turning our focus to East Asian societies in particular, we can see that these populations are heavily influenced by Confucian values of filial piety and the practice of ancestor worship, which are thought to promote positive views of ageing and high esteem for older adults. This has strong roots within the Korean society, for instance, where younger members of families have an entrenched duty to care for ageing members of the family, showing deference to their wisdom and place as decision makers and heads of households. There's actually even a dedicated celebration called the Hwan Gap, which is a key celebration point in Korean society, marking the passage of a parent into old age. India is another country where traditional filial piety remains critical and rooted in intergenerational co-residence. This goes beyond caring for your parents. Your grandparents and other members of the extended family are a firm part of the family unit here. This idea of a joint samyukta kutum family system has its conceptual roots in the ancient belief of dharma. Here, older parents are expected to live with their male children and be treated with respect for their age and wisdom. Elders in Indian households are seen as the heads, and not just in a figuratively passive manner. Their opinion can carry huge weight in intra-family conflicts, reconciliation and other life-changing moments, such as the formation of marriage proposals. Although respectful treatment of the elderly and parents is a dominant part of the Eastern narrative and just a way of being and living, it would be presumptuous to label all Eastern cultures as a generalised mass who are all reverential to the elderly. To do as such would gloss over variations in individual Eastern culture and pointedly ignore cultures that actually cannot be classified as either East or West. Two examples from the East can provide a different and actually very interesting perspective for us to consider. Firstly, the situation in China reveals how culture is influenced by society and politics, specifically in regards to their elderly. Although the filial obligations are still in place, this traditional concept is undergoing a paradigm shift due to China's one-child policy, rising life expectancy, and the increasing westernisation of its population. Secondly, let's look at the example of elderly members of the Chukchi tribe, located in the northernmost part of Russia, in the remote corner of Kamchatka. Here, some of the elderly practice the act of voluntary death. This is the act of dying by the hands of a loved one when a tribe member is considered too old or infirm to be useful anymore. Although this may appear to be a strange custom in the West, such an act is considered heroic in the Chukchi tribe, securing the member a position in the best of the afterworld. Both these examples serve to illustrate just two of the wide-ranging attitudes to the elderly that permeate the East and actually raise an alternative perspective to how traditional elder roles are perceived and absorbed into the collective mind. The Western approach to ageing and the elderly, however, is slightly more haphazard and doesn't actually have the same codified approach that one could describe for Eastern cultures. It can be argued that the West lacks a culturally viable ideal of old age and death and does not view life holistically. There's a tendency to see ageing in the West as almost a shameful experience, with the elderly and infirm traditionally confined to nursing homes. This has a potentially severe psychological effect on the mental health of the elderly. There are very real issues such as isolation, loneliness, and feeling disenfranchised from a society that they helped build. Youth, on the other hand, is fetishised and celebrated in Western society. One need only look at advertising campaigns, Hollywood films, and social media and its influences to see that these are industries predominantly targeted at the younger market, with the elderly often almost invisible in these spaces. In the UK, care of the elderly has always been a hot topic. Current issues include how chronic illnesses suffered by the elderly are placing a huge burden on the National Health Service. Significant funding cuts for social care, the physical, emotional and financial toll suffered by caregivers, why caring for the elderly is still hugely gendered, and the saddening reports of abuse at care homes for the elderly. Recently, controversy ensued when the Conservative government suggested family homes should be included in the means-tested formula for at-home care. Considering care home residents typically spend 2.5 years in care, they can expect to part with at least £77,000, usually by selling the family home. So let's look now at the Islamic stance towards the aged and the elderly. It's worth reminding ourselves at this point that Islam presents itself as a complete way of life, offering an extensive blueprint that defines the norms of the social, moral and behavioural values expected of a believing Muslim. Naturally, within this, there is a clearly established framework. Muslims are instructed to accept old age. For example, in a hadith, sayings attributed to the Prophet, Ibn Abbas reports that the Prophet instructed Muslims to take advantage of 5 blessings before one is deprived of them. The first blessing of the Prophet was to take advantage of youth before old age. Islam also instructs followers in how to deal with those who are elderly and also clearly denotes the rights they possess as individuals and as members of society. Unlike the current Western belief of focusing predominantly on the benefits and capabilities of youth specifically, Islam embraces the entirety of the life circle, giving equal attention to birth, youth, and to old age. Allah is the one who created you from weakness, then made after weakness strength, then made after strength weakness and white hair. This immediately offers a more spiritual and physical understanding of the complete stages of life. The state of birth is equated with weakness, youth with strength, and old age again with weakness. Thus, these verses encourage the individual to see the journey of aging as just a cyclical and natural God-given process. It's within this context that the young are reminded of the basic truth of the human condition through an authentic hadith. If a young man honours an elderly on account of his age, God appoints someone to honour him in his old age. It's not only about securing the pleasure of God, but also about instilling respect from the young towards their elders, establishing a duty of care that can be repaid once youth fades and old age sets in. Islam assures the rights of the elderly and solidifies the attention and care that they are owed in the following verse. Thy Lord hath decreed that ye worship none but him, and that ye be kind to parents, whether one or both of them attain old age in thy life. Say not to them a word of contempt, nor repel them, but address them in terms of honour. And out of kindness lower to them the wing of humility, and say, My Lord, bestow on them thy mercy, even as they cherished me in childhood. This verse is fundamental to the fabric of Islam, as it links the most central tenet of the faith, that of Tawhid, oneness of God, with kindness to parents, clearly establishing the importance of both in a connected and undeniable revelation. Further hadith hold just as much gravitas in serving to forge a connection between the fundamental tenets of faith and the status of the elderly. A stark warning illustrates the danger of neglecting the elderly as tantamount to removing oneself from the Ummah, the global community of Muslims. He is not one of us who does not show tenderness to the young and who does not show respect to the elder. There are a plethora of authentic sayings from the Prophet that continue in this vein, extolling the virtue of care for seniors and the elderly, and can be encapsulated by the term bir, righteousness to parents, a preference to parents over oneself, spouse, and even children in certain circumstances. But Islam does not only provide a framework for care of the elderly, it also expands the scope to tackle potential issues of isolation in wider society and attaches responsibility to the community to help in the care of the aged, by considering the need for involvement and maintenance of an active lifestyle. The obligatory and communal Friday prayer offers the chance of social engagement for the aged, and it gives them a presence and voice within the community. This serves to provide a platform and network of spiritual, physical, social, and communal support that counters issues like isolation and social disengagement. For All Humans believes that further learning from an Islamic perspective could help Western society think about taking in elderly relatives and parents once they're no longer able to live alone and comprehensively look after themselves. Within many Muslim societies and communities, the social contract between the young and the old is very strong. Residential care is never the first option when considering care for the elderly. The Islamic narrative on elderly care is fundamentally rooted within the divine command and religious texts, which draw connections between spirituality, religiosity, and morality. They serve as a stalwart foundation for a sound cognitive and emotional understanding of the dignity of the human condition. The Islamic approach to this issue carries with it a deep respect for the aged. For All Humans believes it provides both an individual and societal obligation designed to be inclusive of the elderly, whilst ensuring moral and spiritual salvation for the Muslim who accords the aged their rights. An holistic approach where wider good triumphs for all. We hope you enjoyed this episode, so let us know what you think in the comments section. Meanwhile, share this with your friends and stay tuned for the next one.